Alright, welcome back to The Wheel Breakers. My name is Matt Waters. I am joined by Mike Thomas. Mike, how are you this episode, which is recorded on a completely different day?
I'm a week fresh from playing basketball for 2 hours. Still not enough recovery time, so
yeah,
if I fall
it's
asleep.
weird that it's still affecting you, man. Like, you need to get back in shape.
It was a grueling game.
Mm-hmm.
I had to run the open court offense on transition, which is a new role for me.
Yes.
I did pretty well in it, though.
Yeah? Did you win? Were you keeping score, or were you just kind of playing for an hour type thing?
It's kind of like, you start off with the first 10 players to show up, and then you kind of just roll from there in terms of, like, winning team stays on. All 4 of the games I played in, my team won.
Nice. Well, there you go. What's the common denominator? You're an expert at basketball. You're also an expert at Game of Thrones. We are on Season 3 now. Another one that's in strong contention for best season. I think, as you said, it's the first 4 are the best 4. Kind of a toss-up between 2 and 3 for me. And I don't really remember much of 4, but we'll get into that next episode. But we've had the Blackwater. People are in different places. Characters are dead. Why don't you take us through our sort of big picture of Season 3?
So I think if Season 1 was all about introducing us to this world, and retroactively we kind of understand that Season 1 is just a prequel to actually the more important things going on. And in the midst of 2 and 3, you kind of get the sense that, oh my god, we're in the end game already to a certain extent. The Lannisters and the Starks, who, dare I say, will win. And I think it's kind of clear in retrospect that this is yet just another small part, a very tiny, insignificant part of the puzzle. And that game comes to an end in Season 3. The Stark versus Lannister battle. I mean, yes, technically it's going on, and it's still going on in Season 7. And
Season 1, it had that of, like, these people have rocked up to Winterfell. They clearly don't like the Starks. When is this gonna, and...
Yeah.
It's set up as the big conflict of the show, and we learn.
And it comes to a conclusion, a definitive conclusion here, with the Lannisters coming out on top of the Starks, as Robb Stark, son of Ned Stark, fails completely in his quest to avenge his father.
He does.
Dies along with his lady mother and his blushing bride and his heir, who was in her uterus.
Sure, and his poor wolf.
Is that the right? Biological, uterus.
Do you want to take some time out and discuss?
Was it different? I just, it's very confusing down there, as you know.
The womb, I guess? In the womb?
The womb! We'll say the womb. That's a good overarching term for it.
Excellent.
And, show over. There's really nothing they could write about after that. So, let's go break down this final season of Game of Thrones.
Sure. So we've got lots of new characters. Some of them we probably won't have time to get to. Some of them will come up here. But, you got Tormund Giantsbane and Mance Rayder, North of the Wall. You got Qyburn, you got Missandei, Grey Worm, Jojen and Mira Reed, Olenna, Thoros. So many people. Ramsay Snow, I think he shows up here. Yeah, he does.
I think kind of quickly, just based on what you said, you can kind of get the sense that now the characters that are getting introduced are infinitely less important than characters that have been introduced so far.
Yeah, these are all people who are sort of supplementary to our characters. Like, Tormund and Mance are there to make Jon's story more interesting. Missandei and Grey Worm are to make Daenerys, etc., etc. So, we said how much we liked seeing Tyrion as Hand of the King last season. He got to kind of rule the roost. It's kind of the highest he flies for a long time. And, after that battle, he is shipped up to, he's in a smaller room, and Tywin is now the Hand of the King, and everyone's forgotten about poor Tyrion. But with Tywin in charge comes a lot of sort of political upheaval, and, we talked about what a great actor he is, Charles Dance, and seeing him, I don't know if he's in it more this season than he was in Season 2, but he feels more present because he's not off to the side, he's not in Harrenhal, he's not in the battlefield, he's in King's Landing. He's getting scenes with Cersei and Joffrey and all these people, and it's great in a different way, seeing him sort of maneuver around everyone.
I mean, it's very clear from this season, if it wasn't already clear, at least since Ned died, is that Tywin Lannister is the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yes.
I think you can probably most neatly sum that up in a couple scenes with Joffrey. One where he completely owns Joffrey while Joffrey is sitting on the Iron Throne.
Yes.
Like literally, I mean, just the way how Tywin towers over him. Like they really, Game of Thrones, for all of its strengths, is not a very subtle show. And
Like, Joffrey, recoils back in the seat as he steps towards him.
And then that leads to, at the very final episode of the season, and one of my favorite lines from the show is Joffrey having a tantrum about not getting his way, when he's saying, "But I'm the king," and Charles Dance says, "Any man who must say they are the king is no king."
Yes.
And
you just sent the most powerful man in Westeros to bed without his supper.
Yeah, if you think he's the most powerful man in Westeros.
Again, a stellar Charles Dance impression.
Thank you.
Yeah. Basketball, impressions, podcasting. What can't you do, Mike Thomas?
I'm a jack of all trades and a master of all trades, actually.
Excellent.
Just the way...
Technology, headphones... Figuring out how those work.
Yes.
Yes.
I can do it all. One of the things that I think Tywin's presence gives both as a show as a character and as an actor is that it gives everything very clear direction because he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly how he wants to go about doing it. And it makes everything... It gives the whole show really kind of a through line, especially on the Westerosi side. Of what's going on, what's everyone doing, what are the stakes.
He's wrangling everyone, he's like, right, what are we fucking doing here? And I think he gives everything gravitas as well. It all feels a lot more serious than it would. Tyrion is, having his fun, but Tywin is doing things. And you see him writing a lot of letters and arranging a lot of things, and it's we know where this will all go, but just even at the time it felt very okay, stuff's happening here.
Right. And you feel like you're very much getting an inside look into the man who's actually, running the war and running the country, which before, I guess you didn't realize how much you did not know until this season. Largely based on the fact that I don't think you could appreciate that Tywin was the most powerful person in the country.
No.
Probably even when Robert was king.
He shows up in episode 8 or something of season 1, or maybe a bit earlier than that. But,
I think it's maybe 6 or 7, but it's he has 3 scenes. It's basically in the entire season. And I think kind of, on a side note, as everyone should be doing in their free time, studying Westerosi history.
Of course.
Tywin Lannister is basically one of the most powerful people in the country from the age of 20. He's hand to the Mad King when the Mad King was less mad.
Yep. Jaime is in the Kingsguard because the Mad King and Tywin had a falling out, and
So his entire life is basically him being in control of this whole country. Even when he's not technically in control or not even technically an important role in the government.
Yep.
And I think it just it made for a show that allowed it to do what it did well more often, if that makes sense. I think this is kind of when the show is starting to figure itself out as how do we make this show work.
Yeah. And
we have better material, and we have a good kind of central character to keep things moving plot-wise in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And, he arranges all these marriages. Joffrey to Marjorie because of the help the Tyrells gave, and much to her annoyance, Cersei to Loras, and then Sansa to Tyrion. And
only Game of Thrones could get away with doing 3 wedding episodes out of 5 episodes between episode 8 of this and episode 2 of the next season, and get away with it.
Yeah. But they establish. I think that actually does work well. The stuff you see in Tyrion and Sansa's wedding, you see it again in the Red Wedding, and you're familiar with it. Yeah, just he literally moves everyone around the board. He displaces people from the positions they're in. Even Cersei, who, generally, while, she can't completely control Joffrey, she's always in this advantageous position. And he's even, putting her in a place, and, she has to marry Laura. And she says, don't make me do it again, and stuff like that. And it's, it's a rare moment where you kind of feel for Cersei, but... Yeah, he certainly, from the moment he arrives back in King's Landing, he orchestrates everything, and he pushes all the pieces around the board for sure. And like you said last episode, I think the show greatly misses.
Yeah.
Even if not necessarily him, no one has stepped into that void. No one is organizing everything in the way that he did.
Yeah, we'll talk a lot about it more in the next episode, but everything after the Red Wedding, up until, I would say, at least season 7, kind of feels like here are the leftovers from the main conflict of the show while we're setting up the final conflict.
And stuff just sort of keeps happening in a way, and I think Tywin really ties things together. Tywin, there's something there.
And while it starts in season 4 when Tywin's still there, it's really apparent when Tywin's gone afterwards, where everything just feels spread out and everyone's just kind of existing. And it's not a terrible idea for a show, but again, you're taking away the best content from the books, you're taking away the best actor, and now you're giving it a more shapeless direction. And we'll get into that in a couple of episodes.
We will. We've talked about Tywin. His son, Jaime Lannister. I noticed something while rewatching this, is that Jaime Lannister and Theon Greyjoy kind of go through a very similar journey in this season, and I think it works much more effectively for one than the other, in that they are both...
Goes better for Theon?
Yes, of course. We all love Theon, and we all hate Jaime. Yeah, they are both brought to their absolute lowest points. Jaime has been captive for however long. He looks disgusting. He has his hand cut off. His money can't buy him anything. He is completely at the mercy of Roose Bolton's men. He even stops quipping, which is how you know it's real. Yeah, so he hits this absolute rock bottom point. He becomes very vulnerable. Theon literally tortured, psychologically and incredibly physically, by Ramsay Snow. And we got a little bit of Theon's theoretically sympathetic backstory in Season 2, and we get Jaime's amazing story about how he saved King's Landing that he says to Brienne. But, you're supposed to, I think, come out of this thinking, oh, these guys that I didn't like, because you think about how these two characters are established in Season 1, with Theon being such a sort of petulant little... he talks down to everyone, and he wants to be important, and he's kind of just a shitty dude. And Jaime, obviously, pushes a kid out of a window, is in an incestuous relationship with his sister.
I think he's killed Jon Arryn.
Yes, all these horrible things. And they put both of them through this treatment of, let's bring them to their absolute worst, make them vulnerable, you'll sympathise, and then they're heroes. Jaime, they will do their best to fuck this up as soon as they can in Season 4 with a very controversial scene. But generally, from this point, Jaime is kind of a heroic character, or maybe not heroic, but just someone that you kind of root for, and you care about his story. Theon... for everything that happens to him, and it's all fucking atrocious, you never are fully I really want him to get revenge. You just want Ramsay to be punished, and you kind of want Theon to just go die or something. And part of it may just be that Nikolaj is a better actor than Alfie Allen. I think that probably helps a great deal. But I just think Jaime's version just works so much better because the bond with Brienne and his quiet moments and those little monologues he does, I think they're all really, really well done. While Theon, it's just torture porn for a very long time.
I think a key part of it is that, one, Jaime is actually entertaining.
Yes.
I think the partnership with Brienne brought out a more humane side of him. At this point, also remember, you kind of forget that Jaime actually has fondness for his little brother.
Yes.
At this point in the show, because they basically only interact for 2 episodes. It's, it's affectionate, but a million things have happened since then. It's probably the last thing on your mind. It wasn't until Season 4 aired that I remembered they liked each other.
Yeah, they do.
Because the whole Tyrion and Cersei thing just so dominates the landscape there. Mm-hmm. So it's really, I think the Brienne thing was really, really crucial for Jaime, along with him being a better actor, more entertaining.
Yeah.
I think 2 things. One, by far one of the hardest things to watch the first time going through, and the thing that I pretty much have looked away every time since then. The losing of the hand is just one of the most brutal things to happen on the show, and maybe that's not fair because, morally speaking, a lot worse things have happened than Jaime Lannister losing his fucking hand.
But the way it's filmed,
the way that it's filmed, the way they build up to it. They take full advantage of the fact that we are conditioned through art historically at this point to want to see the best in shitty dudes, and they take full advantage of that with Jaime. It's we don't, at the end of the day, we can kind of tell that behind this charismatic dude, there's probably, or we want there to be someone decent behind there, and we don't want to see bad things happen to him for no reason. And then the other big thing is after the scene in the Schwitz with Brienne. I immediately texted someone and said, oh, Jaime Lannister's the new lead of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Because you spend this entire time hearing the story that Jaime was the Kingslayer. He stabbed his king in the back and allowed his father to come in and run ransack over King's Landing. And, yes, factually, that is what happened. Yeah. But the actual context for it, one, obviously completely justifies him stabbing the king.
Yep.
And I think just the way that kind of there's a great scene in Season 1 where Jaime says, where he says to his father, I don't care what anyone thinks of me. And it's And Tywin says, that's what you want people to think of you, that you don't care what any of them think of you.
Yeah.
And it's clear how much that, quote-unquote, preventing what the words of the sheep are affecting him over these years has done a lot of damage to him, and it kind of just all boils over in this moment. And, at the end of the day, you can kind of see, once again, just like with Tywin, just like with Tony Soprano, you can see a good person and Nikolaj Kostner, and you can kind of see it, and you want to root for him.
Yeah.
And
like,
then he fights a bear with a hand.
Yeah. I think it's a really nice touch that he saves Brienne from being horrifically raped with his lie about the sapphires, but then that lie is what prevents her from being ransomed successfully back home, because they're holding out for more money because he's exaggerated the wealth. I think that's a really nice... he helped her, but he's also doomed her, so that's why he has to go back and everything. Yeah, just really, really great stuff. And some of my favourite stuff from the book with Jaime, they obviously can't film it because it's his internal monologue, but when he sort of gets back to King's Landing and he's trying to sort of whip the Kingsguard back into shape, and he's looking at his legacy in the big book and everything, and just his concern with, like, actually I would like to be remembered as a good dude, and you get some of that here. And just that scene with the baths is so good. And obviously she goes from calling him Kingslayer constantly to Sir Jaime, and like it's great. I love those two as a pairing. It's why I kind of brought it up last episode, even though they don't get much time compared to here.
Yeah, it's really great. It's probably one of the better pairings the show's done.
Yeah.
It's up there with Arya and Tywin, and they come back to it a lot, obviously, throughout, but they know how good it is. I mean, Brienne brings out the very best in Jaime, and listen, like I said, like 95% of all storytelling that's come out of the Western world is about dudes becoming the better versions of themselves. So
the redemption story for white men.
So, listen, we are predisposed to find the story interesting. Yes. We are just spokes in the wheel, everybody. Don't worry about it.
We'll break it eventually, don't worry. And then, Theon and Ramsay, it's like, when you see Ramsay at this point, it's like, yeah, he's horrible, but you kind of don't really realise... I don't know if he's in it for longer than Joffrey, but he's there as long as Joffrey almost, and he becomes a much bigger threat in some ways, but it's just, at this point, it's just this horrible guy just torturing Theon. But
I think if Ramsay is useful for any one thing, it is making Joffrey seem slightly empathetic for how pathetic he is and how much he never stood a chance of being good.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the other two kids that Cersei raised seem to be pretty decent human beings.
Yeah.
But odds are Joffrey was just always going to be this way.
Yeah, like he tortured animals as a child. And
yeah.
But he is still fundamentally, like, cowardly and physically frail, and, like, he is scared of... Like, when he's actually challenged and people don't just immediately do what he says, he doesn't know what to do. And then you have Ramsay, who is far more of an actual physical threat as well and everything. And just helping Theon escape, saving him from being raped by several men, only to lead him back into his torture cell and everything. It's like, Jesus, man, like, was this necessary? Yeah. And like having him seduced by those two women, and then when he finally gives in, that's when he steps in. And it's like, oh god, like, it's grim. It's grim stuff, but it's just not, like I say, it just doesn't work as well for Theon because
no one gives a fuck about Alfie Allen.
Yeah.
In the book, it's important to note at the end of book 2, when Theon gets knocked out, you don't see him in the books again for 3 books.
Yes.
Which would be about the equivalent of 2 to 3. No, we wouldn't see him again until season 5 to be the equivalent. That's not just an adding thing, everyone. It's the books are complicated. Anyway,
they are. Some of them take place at the same time, blah, blah, blah. And also, doesn't he show up calling himself Reek in the books?
Yeah, he's the one who actually cuts off, what's his name? The old man with the whiskers. He kills him.
Oh, yeah, Roderick.
Yeah, so Roderick Cassell. It's done a little bit differently. Reek is there the whole time. Reek helps them.
Yeah, and it gives this impression that, like, Reek is a thing he's done several times, and it makes it even more sinister. But yeah.
I mean, I think the show was very open. What they were going for was they were trying to make the audience feel like, just like Theon would be feeling like, you don't know who this guy is, you don't understand why it's happening, etc., etc. But when you rewatch it, there's not a lot of screen time devoted to this in season 3.
No.
But it's so frustrating the first time through because it's so needless and boring and stupid.
Yeah. And, like, you know, you had so much Theon in season 2. Like, we didn't talk about it last episode, but there's so much of him, like, taking Winterfell and being inept, and it's like, them just insisting on Theon being a thing is just, like, just drop it, guys. Like, this exact story potentially for like a better actor or a slightly better character maybe works, but yeah, it doesn't quite work.
They really love Reek. I mean, they really loved Ramsay, and they have a really high opinion of what Alfie Allen is doing, and they are wrong on both counts.
Well, the guy that plays Ramsay, he's very good at these like very like sinister little quirky. Anyway, Daenerys Targaryen. We did not talk about her in Karth because it's kind of boring. I think this is her... I kind of call this the highs and lows of Daenerys because I think this is her best season storyline-wise, or at least the least boring. It's got the huge moments with the Unsullied and everything, but then the final punctuation point of that best season is one of the worst things to happen in the whole show, with that Misa moment, with the whitest woman to ever live, raised up by all these not white people, and it's like, oh god, guys, did you not see this when you were looking back?
What were they thinking? And like, why? You know, this is what happens. This is what happens when no one with power of any sense is in the room making decisions. Just what were they possibly thinking?
I think what they said was because they were filming on location and they weren't going to fly in thousands of actors. They just use locals, and it turns out this is how it looks. And it's like, that's not good enough. Why
does the scene exist at all?
I know.
God, like, every defensive shit like this always just accepts the premise of
it had to happen.
It's so stupid.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, it's definitely probably the best Dany season overall, right?
Yeah, I think so.
She's far more active here. She's really coming into her own. Mm-hmm. She is in her late 20s now and has figured out somewhat who she wants to be as a person, and she is actualizing it. I'd say probably one of the funniest things, if you put yourself back in I'm watching season 3 without any context of the books. I've only watched each episode of the show once up until this point.
Yeah.
And you get to the big end of this big reveal at the end of the first episode, and you're like, who the fuck is that old white guy with a beard? Yeah. Sir Barristan Selmy returns. He's probably one of my favorite characters.
He's great. I think
him
and Jorah kind of sniping at each other a little bit, but in a very pleasant way, I think is really fun.
I'll have a quick rant in episode 5 about Barristan, but there's probably shouldn't devote too much time to him. But I think he was wonderful, and the show kind of didn't know what to do with him to make him more meaningful, which is stupid because the book actually shows you how you make him more meaningful. Anyway, but Dany is just kind of taking control of her life in a way here, that after she was kind of a captive or subject to everyone else's whims in seasons 1 and season 2, she's out on her own. She's making shit happen. She has decided that she is going to be the great white savior of Essos.
There is a Southos as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. It's a very condescending narrative. It is a huge improvement over what had been happening with her.
Yeah. Well, I think it starts out well. I think her ongoing war against slavery, and saying it like that, I sound like an asshole, but it just... the execution of her trying to free every slave, resolve every conflict, make life wonderful for everyone, it just gets so boring and frustrating. But here, I think it works really well. Like her seizing the Unsullied and setting them free, and revealing that she speaks Valyrian after we've had several episodes of the slave master calling her a whore and all kinds of stuff in the subtitles, and then you get that oh shit moment when she understands Valyrian. And
it's very, very well executed, despite its faulty premise in some ways. I mean, I think, and even the big picture, I get it. Like Daenerys, I mean, I think if there's a potential payoff in the end, it will be that Daenerys does not win.
I hope
because Daenerys is a conqueror; she is not a ruler.
Yeah, I was really hoping for a narrative where it turns out she's actually the bad guy. Like she's invading a foreign land with a huge army and dragons, and doesn't understand the people and all this. But
I mean, they kind of unfortunately set it up. Like the rules they set up is that, I mean, it's like when the opposite side is pro-slavery, it's like okay, how much of a villain could she really be, right?
Indeed.
But, which is like, it's just, you have control of how you set up the world. It's like, you can decide. It's not literally history. So it's kind of frustrating how they kind of force you to embrace this white savior character.
Yeah.
She just, it sucks.
Yes.
But even though it's just, at least it's schlock, but it's much better executed schlock than a lot of the schlock.
Yeah, and like with her come the dragons, so we have to root for her if we want to see dragons, if that's your thing. We get the debut of Dario Naharis, the first actor to play him, Francis from Deadpool here, in a terrible, terrible wig. Knowing who the character is and that he's meant to be like devilishly handsome and everything, I don't understand how they fucked this up so badly that he just looks so gross, but we've always known that Jorah is in love with her, and I actually I'm not a huge fan of that storyline, but a moment I really appreciate is after Grey Worm, Jorah, and Dario have taken the city or whatever, and Grey Worm and Jorah arrive back at the tent covered in blood, panting, like he's so ecstatic to tell her, we did it. And then her first question is, what of Dario Naharis? And like the heartbreak on his face, it's like that was a really well done moment. For better or worse with everything that happens with Dario, I think the next guy to play him is infinitely better. But he does debut here, and everyone just quietly forgets that he looked completely different.
Yeah, as we mentioned, there's a ton of recasting going on in Game of Thrones all throughout the whole show. I think if there's one thing that I found annoying about the recasting is that they got such a completely different type of performer than this one that, it truly felt like a brand new character.
They went and got another Oberyn kind of thing. Yeah,
and I kind of liked what Ed Skrein was doing. Like, it just felt like a dramatic departure from what we had seen so far. But I feel like whether you like it or not, it was so distinctly different than what he was replaced with that I was just like, what? It was very distracting. But I think at the time, not knowing what Dario was going to be asked to do as a character, clearly Ed Skrein and the way he was portraying it was not going to work out.
No.
But for what he had to do in this season, none of what he did really bothered me. And it's also kind of Daenerys, there's kind of in this area are slowly planting the seeds of Jorah's one of many future comings and goings. That will happen so often that you'll lose track of them all. I think that's interesting. A big departure from the books is that in the books, Barristan Selmy sits on the King's Council, so he knows that Jorah is betraying the Queen this whole time, and that's why in the book he's like under disguise trying to figure out who to trust for a while, and then as soon as he reveals himself, Jorah gets kicked out. Here, they make several mentions of it that Barristan did not sit on the King's Council meetings, just to make sure. I'll give him credit for planning that out. Yeah,
I also like the hypocrisy of Jorah. He gives Barristan shit, and he's like, while I was over here defending her from Robert's assassins, you were over there like protecting Robert. It's like, dude, you arranged that assassination. Now, obviously, he doesn't know that, but you don't get to play this card.
I like Jorah's character. I think he's a good example of a nuanced character.
Yeah, he is
in the show.
When I think of Dany and like the highest point she reaches, it is revealing she speaks Valyrian, setting fire to the Master, taking the Unsullied, marching out of Yunkai with. Is it Yunkai? Or is it Volantis? I don't know. And dropping the whip, and like they're all with her anyway. I think that's as high as she gets, I think. And we'll see what happens from there.
Pretty much everything from this point forward is a mixed bag.
Yes, it is.
I'd say it's most generous. If you want to make the argument that the Misha scene going forward with Dany is just terrible, I would not blame anyone for making that argument.
Yes. No, it's maybe the worst thing in the history of the show. Anyway, speaking of departures from the book, which is a thing you said in the last 2 minutes, let's talk about Arya, let's talk about the Hound, and let's talk about the Brotherhood. So, I really like this trio of actors they have for the Brotherhood here. Like, we have the recast Beric Dondarrion.
Who is like the most nondescript, wimpy-looking dude in the first season ever. Thank God they recast him. Holy shit.
Thoros of Myr. Paul Kaye is one of my favourite sort of character actors. I think he's great here as Thoros. And then the Archer, I think he's called Angai. I think he's great too. And he just disappears altogether.
Yeah,
right?
I completely forgot about him.
Same.
Until the last rewatch.
Yeah, but they're just really cool. Like when they threaten, when they capture Gendry and Arya and Hot Pie, and like he fires that arrow straight up in the air and stuff like that.
Listen, Legolas had a huge impact on everyone making action movies in the last 20 years, and
Bows
recognize
everywhere.
that people doing cool things with bows and arrows is just automatically a good way to make a good impression.
It sure is.
Hence the only redeeming thing from the King Arthur movie being Mads Mikkelsen from 2004.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. I didn't have Movie Pass. Yeah, I just think these three, I think they're really great together. Like, them just hanging out in the cave while Arya is sort of the outsider. I think that's really good. Like, just having them just sort of tease each other so much, and Thoros being this drunk priest, and
not only is you said his name is Paul Kaye.
Yeah.
Not only is he a really good performer in this and doing a really good job with it, I mean, I think Thoros Amir really captures a lot of the dare I say themes of Game of Thrones very, very well.
Yep.
Which is that like he has part of this like legendary performance at the Greyjoy Rebellion. Where really he was just so drunk he doesn't remember any of it whatsoever.
Yep.
And multiple characters throughout the show talk about Thoros Amir storming the battlements of the Iron Islands with his flaming sword, and literally he has no idea what they're talking about. If it wasn't for the alcohol, there's no way he would have done it.
Yeah. I don't know if it comes up in the show, but like he was in like one of the King's tourneys or something, and he lasted quite a long way into it with his flaming sword.
Because no one wanted to touch the flaming sword. Like, it's, I think theme is kind of like this over-talked about thing sometimes. I always roll my eyes when Christopher Nolan talks about the importance of theme in the Batman movies he made. But sometimes it's at least notable and interesting. And I think, I don't know, I really like Thoros Amir. And we don't see them again for like 40 episodes for some reason.
No, I think this is a huge missed opportunity, because I think they had a great little group here, both in terms of just enjoying watching them act, and I think they're interesting to the plot, because they're broadly on the side of good, but they don't have any allegiances. Like the Brotherhood without banners, like that's an intriguing concept in a world that's all about houses and political allegiances. Yeah,
I mean, they're claiming they're still fighting for King Robert. I think the Hound kind of wisely says, like, what the fuck are you guys doing? He's dead. Like, who are you? Like, that's the stupidest, like, it sounds really cute, but it's the stupidest thing ever.
Yeah.
And Hound's largely right about that. I agree. I think they're really interesting. I thought they could have been used better. If I had to guess, they were stalling on making a decision about Lady Stoneheart.
Yes, because this is one of the ongoing, most bitched about things when people are, oh, the books are so much better. Kat, obviously, is murdered in the Red Wedding. And in the books, she is brought back as the mute. A
silent zombie who works with the Brotherhood. And actually, I didn't pick up on this in the books because, I mean, it's barely mentioned in the books. But Beric Dondarrion gave up his last life so Catelyn could be resurrected.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I had to read a bunch of Wikipedia articles.
And Arya has that dream about... I mean, because all the Starks in the book, I think, can walk to some extent, and in the show they make it just Bran. But Arya has that dream through Nymeria's eyes, and it's heavily implied that she dragged Catelyn out of the river and everything. But yeah, I think they're great, and I think the Hound really comes into his own here, where it's like he is obviously not a great person, but he's so like take me as I am that there's something likable about him as he sits there and. You know, like you said, saying like, "What the fuck are you talking about? He's dead," and you know, I murdered that kid, but it's not my place to tell a king or a prince or whatever not to do something.
Well, I think also he's a good example of some of the things they've explored with Jaime, which is that we get introduced to him in pretty much the very worst way possible.
Yep.
And what, in retrospect, is probably one of the few truly awful things he's ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of let that decision kind of guide our thinking about that person as a whole.
Yeah.
When in reality, obviously, we all do really terrible fucking shit, and we would probably all have a moment morally equivalent to that, given the context of the time period.
Yeah. But like he saved Sansa twice. Like he stopped her from pushing Joffrey.
Show, he's done way more good than bad in the context of the show than that one moment.
And obviously, and you know, if you want to subscribe to the idea that, you know, the Red God is real, there's a hell of a lot of evidence that, like, the things that they say about him are true. But, you know, he wins that trial by combat, which theoretically proves that he has a place still in the narrative. And, like, if you think about all the good he has done, directly or indirectly, there's a great argument for that. And they just let him go, and he ends up in possession of Arya, as it were, which... Those two together, also a badass pairing. You know, we talked about a lot of pairings last week, but yeah, they will be a great tandem going forward. I also, something I really liked about Thoros and the Brotherhood and all that generally, you know, obviously he brings Beric Dondarrion back to life. And Melisandre, from the moment she arrived in Season 2, you know, she's set up as this powerful character. She worships the Lord of Light. And every time they reveal someone else worships the Lord of Light or the Red God or whatever name you want to give them, it's kind of like, oh, so you guys are the same even though you're so different. Because Jack and Hagar, like, his god is the same god, but they all talk about this same god different ways. But when she shows up to get Gendry, and she is, like, astounded that Thoros has brought Beric back to life, not once, but 6 times or 7, I really liked that moment, that, like, she does all this grandstanding about her power and the power of the Lord of Light. And this drunk priest in a cave who doesn't know, and he admits that, like, he fucked, like, every whore in King's Landing, and he did the worst possible stuff. And he only started believing when his friend died, and he just said the only words he knew. And he's just accidentally more powerful than her, in theory. I thought that was such a great little moment, and it's always stuck with me whenever I think of Melisandre and, like, the ongoing is she a con artist thing. But yeah, I thought that was really well handled.
Yeah.
So, we've alluded to it. There's no way of not talking about it. The Red Wedding. The episode is actually called The Rains of Castamere, but everyone just calls it The Red Wedding. In the similar vein to Blackwater and others, this is your kind of big event episode. This one is not a bottle one, though. A lot of stuff... I actually think this is a good episode in general. Everyone thinks of just The Red Wedding, but you get a lot of good stuff here in general. The Wildling crew do their thing, and Daenerys seizes Yunkai and all of that. But I guess the big thing is the wedding. And I like how in the first 10 minutes they seemingly wrap up this looming, like, we're going to have to deal with Robb breaking his promise to Walder Frey, and they make you think, oh, it's all going to be okay. Like, he forgives him, Edmure's going to marry one of them, Robb apologised, blah, 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 everything's fine. And then it's, of course, very much not fine.
Yeah. They do the traditional bread and salt with my guest.
Yes,
they make sure to buy guest, right?
They make sure to zoom right in on that when he's eating bread and salt.
I mean, like, to be fair, most people do not pick up on that or understand what it means. No. Yeah, I mean, this is probably, in terms of the show reaching cultural importance, this is the most important moment in the show.
Yeah.
The Red Wedding was a thing. It was a moment in time for people. It was one of the most common things where people who had read the books filming people who did not read the books watching this scene unfold.
Yeah.
I would say first, my reaction to it is, I think there was kind of initial, like, glee at, like, the big things happening.
Yeah.
And then I slammed my fist down on the table in the most predictable me moment ever when they killed the wolf. I was like, I literally went, no!
Yeah, like, fuck that. That felt fucking unnecessary.
It wasn't clear that the wolves were just going to be systematically killed off one by one to me at this point. And I was not emotionally prepared for that in any way.
And then mounting its head on Robb's body is fucking atrocious.
I know it's fine. I mean, this sounds so stupid, but it wasn't until I was 24 years old and watched Season 3 of Game of Thrones, I'm like, you know what? It is kind of important what happens to a person's body after they die. Like, that shouldn't happen.
No, it should not.
That was literally the first time I ever reconsidered, like, my cavalier attitude towards, like, bodily remains. I was like, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
We should treat the dead with more respect.
So they're kind of combining... Well, not really. It's sort of an event episode like Blackwater, but they're combining that with, like, the shocking death of Ned that they did with...
Yeah, it's closer in spirit to the Ned death than the Blackwater. And then, we'll get into the future penultimate episode soon enough.
I said how, like, before I even started watching Game of Thrones, I knew Ned died. I did not know what happened with the Red Wedding until I saw it.
Oh yeah, neither did I.
That was shock. That was one of my few, like, huge shocks. Next season we'll get into some of it as well. But yeah, just what a shocking... Like, it's so violent. Like, stabbing a pregnant woman in the stomach repeatedly, and, slitting Kat's throat, and Kat slitting Walder's wife's throat, and the tension of it as well. Like, Roose Bolton looking at his own wrist so that Kat will then look at it, and you see that he's wearing armor underneath, and, like, the dude has always been sketchy as fuck, but, like, this confirmation that he is...
Did you know who he was before this episode?
I mean, I remembered him being around, and obviously...
Okay.
Like,
I don't think I did. I don't think I even recognized him as someone who was around. And he's been in, like, close to almost every episode since Season 2 at this point.
Well, like...
He made that little of an impression.
Yeah, like, the people that captured Jaime and Brienne. or working for him, and he sets them free, and that sort of lays the groundwork that, like...
Yeah.
He is
more probably should have been more suspicious then.
Yeah, like, it lays the groundwork that he's more concerned with winning the favour of Tywin Lannister than, like, keeping a huge, important war hostage. Like...
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big reasons such a shock is Martin very openly said, well, people would have expected that Ned, being our hero, would have been alive the entire time. And then once people got over that shock, they would have expected his oldest son to avenge him. So that's kind of like what he was going for. I think that's why it works. Yeah. I think also important to keep a note is that we spend a lot more time with Robb in the show than we do in the books.
Yeah, we do. And he gets a lot of great scenes with Talisa. Like their little relationship, I think, is great. For whatever you want to say about, like, the lack of charisma that Richard Madden has in comparison to Sean Bean. Like, I think
future James Bond.
Yeah, potentially. And I think George Martin, in that same quote, he also said that, you know, the baby had to be stabbed because otherwise people would think, okay, well, the baby will avenge them. And it's like, okay, well, this is all...
I think the showrunner said that because in the books, she's still alive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's not at the wedding.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because she's not a thing, really, is she? She's just
she's
some woman that he brought home. Yeah, there you go.
And I think, you know, it's not really worth your breath defending Game of Thrones in this way. But even Martin will say that the show's treatment of Shay and Talisa is much better than how he treated Shay and Jane Westerling.
This is true.
Small steps, baby steps,
yes.
I guess. It's hugely shocking. You don't expect it to go down at all, I'd say. But also, in retrospect, it not only makes perfect sense in terms of being set up, but it's like, well, of course this happened. Like, what else could have happened? Like, no other option makes sense.
And, like, Kat warned him the second all this happened, like, you are going to have to adhere to this marriage. And temporarily, it all being okay, and, like, the comedy of Edmure, like, dreading which of these... quote-unquote ugly women, I think they're described as far more unattractive in the books, and then, like, the only pretty daughter is marched out. He's like, oh my god, yes! And, like, to turn from that, and then, like, the sinister Cat sort of seeing it happen almost in slow motion, and the song starts to play, and they've done their best to try and establish this song, but I don't think most people would have picked up on it.
And no one should have. I think it's kind of just like a neat thing to pick up on. Later seasons.
Yeah. And as I said when we were talking about the weddings last week, a lot of the stuff that they established with Tyrion and Sansa's wedding, you see it here. Yeah, I like cloaking the bride and all that, and the bedding ceremony and all that sort of stuff. I think it helps make it... I don't know if it makes it feel like it's going to be okay, but then once everyone's cleared the hall and it all just gets so violent. And, you know, Kat's Hail Mary pass of let Robb go and I promise we'll take no revenge. It's like, well, that's bullshit. Robb was never going to adhere to that. And then Walder just being like, I'll find another wife. And then goodbye Kat.
His mother, like, it's just like, stop. Like,
just that he's dead now. Like,
it's done.
Even if he lives, he is dead from this moment. Like, he's got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really well executed. I think you can make an argument the show's all downhill from here. In a lot of ways, it's the best conflict they had on the show was the Lannisters versus the Starks, or the Lannisters versus the world.
Yeah,
probably more accurately, just because I think the Lannisters as this dysfunctional Bluth-like family in some ways.
Oh god, someone cut together the Arrested Development thing.
Was very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think them taking on the Starks and Stannis simultaneously was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, we still thought maybe the Greyjoys would play some significant role in it.
No.
It seemed like a lot of things were on the table, and this kind of ends that conflict, and I don't think any conflict since then has come really anywhere close to this core conflict that was started in season 1 and played out in season 2 and 3.
And, like, a thing that, like, one of the big questions people ask when it comes to, like, Game of Thrones in general, it's like, who do you want to see ultimately win? And I think that question has become, like, I don't really care anymore. Like, I don't think I want any of them to win now. And I think before all of this, I had my dogs in the fight kind of thing, and now I'm like, do we really want any of these Westeros people to win? Do we really want Daenerys to win? Like, it's all...
Well, it's like I think in my naivete at the time, I did not appreciate how, like, Daenerys and Jon were really the be-all, end-all, and everybody else was kind of small potatoes in comparison.
Well, I think it's always been kind of telegraphed because, you know...
Oh, no, I agree. I'm saying I didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, and like I kind of wanted anyone else to do something, and like Tyrion is your third, but like it's like, okay, I understand Jon and Dany are like the big sexy characters, like the dragons and the White Walkers and all of this, but like I'm far more interested in what's happening in King's Landing and all these people making political moves and this kind of stuff than I am in the two big characters. And I think that's, you know, when you're the people you always intended to end up as the most important, I spend most of this actively either not caring about them or being like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, that's kind of a failing of the show. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it immediately goes downhill from here, but it is definitely like a huge, if you're looking at the timeline of the show and the quality of the show, this is definitely a big, clear point on that timeline, along with the death of Tywin next season. Yeah. So.
I mean, I think this is basically the end of political maneuverings meaning anything whatsoever on the show. Yeah. And, like, obviously there's some stuff tried in later seasons, something's dead completely.
Yeah.
But I think this is where a lot of the natural intrigue that hooked me into the show dies in this moment, along with Robb and Catelyn and the Wolf. And, you know, it wasn't immediately obvious at the time to me, but as I said, like, everything else kind of just feels like, after this, everything that comes after the show just kind of feels like, well, we've been watching these characters this far, might as well just see what happens with them for the rest of the time.
Yeah, it's like a thing you can't not be invested because it's
and what I mean is not just as like a viewer. I mean that's what the show feels like. The show feels like we have all these characters who are still alive. Let's see what happens to them now.
Yeah,
as opposed to there being this natural story that is connecting all of them. And I get, yes, technically, of course, there is, but it really becomes clear how much the next three seasons feel like filler when you rewatch this a couple times.
Yeah, and then they realise they were doing that, and they suddenly accelerate the pace, and it hurts it, and yeah. Okay, so those are our big ones. As is tradition, why don't you mop up any extra little points you may have?
Stannis is pretty useless this season in terms of the character.
I mean, they introduce his wife and daughter.
Yeah. But, like, they're barely characters. They're real. I mean, like, listen, it's not that nothing cute doesn't happen. And when you rewatch it, you're more patient with it than the first time around, of course. But the big moment at the end is Stannis realizing that this War of Five Kings is stupid in terms of the big picture. But they take forever to actually actualize anything on it. It was a big tease that I think they paid off poorly in season 4.
Although, I mean, the thing with Gendry and the leeches, he speaks the names of Robb, Joffrey, and Balon, and they all do die in that order that he names them. So for a while, that was quite interesting to me. As long as Balon was still alive, I was like, that's interesting. And then that ultimately...
The Lord of Light exists on a certain level. Yeah. Peter Vaughn as Maester Aemon, the second last Targaryen still standing, returns at the end of the season. He did not die between seasons 1 and 3, thankfully. He becomes another one of my favorite characters in the next 2 seasons. Mance Rayder, the King Beyond the Wall, appears for the first time, played by the greats. Tyrion Hans? Sure.
Steppenwolf.
Steppenwolf. He's a great actor.
Yeah, he is.
A couple of his lines really stand out to me. I'm going to build the greatest. I'm going to let the biggest fire the world has ever seen. Like that in particular got repeated a ton in the What Happened Last Time on Game of Thrones scenes for like the next 18 episodes. In the book, he's kind of more clearly this much more like hippy-dippy guy who does not seem like a warrior at all. There's a little traces of that if you watch really, really closely in the set of his camp, but really he kind of just seems like a great leader, regardless of any military strength. Yeah,
like the kind of mystery of how he did unite all these tribes is kind of like, how did you do that?
And like they have there's a couple of good throwaway lines. There's like, well, I told him the truth that if we all don't go south, we're all going to die. But it's like, yeah, but there's still more to it than that. I think the scene where Jon proved his worth to him, or proved his loyalty to him, or at least demonstrated potentially he would be loyal, where he said, I want to fight on the side that fights for a living.
Yeah.
Not only did that do a good job of convincing Mance Rayder, it did a good job convincing me that Jon would be a fucking idiot to ever go back to the Night's Watch.
Yeah, it's good because he's selling a lie with a line of truth, because it did bother him that like Jorah didn't give a shit about what Craster was doing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I would say that the only downside is that I kind of thought it was stupid that it was so convincing that like that lie was right. That was a very good reason to stick with the wildlings.
Egret's right here, man. She's real. This is a real thing.
Yeah, Night's Watch is stupid. Westeros is stupid. Stop.
It is.
Break some fucking wheels. But yeah, Asha and the completely useless Rickon Stark say goodbye to Bran, and we don't see them again till season 6.
Yep.
At this point, David Bradley has appeared as Walder Frey 3 times. He will, in total, appear as him 6 times in by far one of the most memorable characters in the show, despite appearing less than 10% of the episodes.
Just
Good
so,
on you, David Bradley.
Just so vulgar and like just doesn't give a shit about anything. And...
Good on you.
Yeah.
The Blackfish appears. I thought Clive Russell did a great job.
Oh, the whole...
I was in...
One of my favourite moments is Edmure missing the Viking funeral shot 3 times, and then he fires it, doesn't even look, and walks off. Like,
he really embodied the Blackfish very well. I thought it was stupid that he didn't appear again until season 6. I thought it was really stupid they didn't keep him around to have him go join Sansa's army. The actor who would later go and play Tommen when Tommen became more important pops up as a cousin Lannister.
He sure does.
Good on you, getting that extra money. A Lady Olenna appears for the first time this season.
Oh, she's great.
An instant crowd favorite.
Yep.
She's great. Salladhor Saan makes his what would seem to be an annual appearance, although that went away eventually. There's a lot we could talk about with that character, but we don't really have time.
Yeah. Littlefinger says chaos isn't a pit, it's a ladder.
Chaos is a ladder.
Yeah. I fucking hate his wandering accent for Littlefinger, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, this is like when his accent really... and I'd actually say the moment when Sansa gets on the boat and Littlefinger shows up in season 4... That's when his accent's just completely gone off the reservation. It's really startling.
So just be Irish, man. Like, just do it.
Yeah, like, it's okay. It's this whole country seems to be, at least from the UK.
Yeah.
And the whole Joffrey and what's her name, Marjorie thing's pretty fun to watch too. I think they do that very well, all things considered.
And the forced wedding of Tyrion and Sansa, and Tyrion getting too drunk to even attempt to have sex with Sansa, and like Shay, that's a great little like you're fucked thing with Tyrion. It's like you have to do this, and like having to tell Sansa in front of Shay and everything. Like I thought that was all like. On some level, you kind of want Sansa to be more on board with it, because like Tyrion is kind of. He's so nice to you, and like he has the best of intentions, but like you get it, like his family murdered hers repeatedly, and they do that brief moment where she's like coming up with ways to prank someone, and then like right back to the tears. But like the never-ending parade of bad things that happen to Sansa Stark is not something I've ever enjoyed.
Yeah, we're 1 season away from Sansa finally having her Daenerys season 3 moment of being like, okay, I'm a person now, I'm going to do things. Yeah. And then they take it away from her again. But eventually it comes back.
Podrick, so good in bed that women refuse to take money.
Yeah, cute, but kind of stupid.
I think, like, when I say it, and if I write it down, it's like, this is dumb and potentially offensive and immature and whatever. But I think the way that Bronn and Tyrion play it, I think makes it really work. Like,
I think it works because the joke is really on Bronn and Tyrion.
Yeah.
Like, that's, at the end of the day, who's being poked fun at.
Yeah.
Whether I don't think they really recognize that. They should have been gravely insulted in some way.
Yes.
But maybe that just makes it all the more the joke on them.
Potentially.
But season 3 Game of Thrones. Good series finale.
Yep.
Nothing left to discuss, obviously.
No.
Tormund is fun.
He is. He is a great dude. So I still think 2 is slightly better, but 3 has the Red Wedding, and that's the big... sexy, everyone's talking about it, cultural touchstone, so there you go.
I think 3 more pieces are moving.
Sure.
And I have ADHD, so I'm gonna go with 3.
Well, there you go. On that bombshell, this has been another episode of...
I forgot how, mental health in England is still such a taboo thing.
No, it's not.
Oh, yes, it is.
No, it's not.
I once made a
joke
to someone on Twitter from England saying, like, have you discussed this with your therapist recently? And they legitimately got offended that I suggested it there.
Well, potentially, but anyway, we're not going to do a cultural comparison thing because we'll be here for 4 hours. This has been another episode of The Wheel Breakers. We will be back next time to discuss Season 4. Finally, my boy Oberyn is going to show up, and that will just only end well, I assume.
And who are you, the proud Lord, say that I must bow so low? coat of red, lying still has course. Mine along and shot my